What if the greatest deception of your life wasn't a person, a betrayal, or a mistake, but the idea that everything that happens to you is just coincidence? Think about it for a second. How many times have you felt that something almost made sense? That uncomfortable moment when a conversation arrives just as you were about to give up. That message that appears at the exact moment you thought no one remembered you. That inner impulse pushing you to do something that you decide to ignore because it doesn't make sense. And then you move on. You move on as if nothing happened. You keep calling it a coincidence. You keep telling yourself it wasn't important. But here's the question. No one asks you, and it may unsettle you more than you expect. What if it wasn't a coincidence, but a test? Because there is a very quiet way to lose your life, and it has nothing to do with failing. It has to do with not responding, with living by turning down the volume on signals, with turning every call into noise, with hiding behind the idea that the world is chaotic, unpredictable, indifferent. Because that way, you don't have to decide. You don't have to risk. You don't have to move. Most people aren't lost because they don't know what to do. They're lost because they learned not to trust what they feel, to doubt that knot in their stomach, to ignore that now or never sensation, to anesthetize intuition by calling it chance. And the most disturbing part is this. The longer you do that, the quieter life becomes. Fewer doors appear, fewer opportunities show up, not because they disappear, but because you stopped seeing them. If you've ever felt that your life is speaking to you and you don't know in which language, stay. Because what you're about to hear is not comfortable, not reassuring, and not meant to distract you. It's meant to wake you up. Because there's something almost no one dares to admit out loud. It's not that life has no meaning, it's that it demands something from you in return. And that something is usually what you avoid the most. Deciding, acting, giving up the comfort of not choosing. Let me take you somewhere uncomfortable, but necessary. Think about your own story. Not the version you tell at dinners or online, but the real one. The one that appears at night when everything goes quiet. How many times did you know you had to do something and didn't do it? Not because you couldn't, but because you hesitated, because you waited for a clearer sign, because you wanted a guarantee, and the guarantee never came. Here's a psychological truth that's hard to swallow. The human mind hates uncertainty, but it needs risk to feel alive. That's why you freeze. That's why you overanalyze. That's why you wait for the perfect moment. And while you wait, something invisible begins to happen. Your confidence erodes. Every time you ignore a deep impulse, nothing dramatic happens. There's no immediate punishment, no explosion, just a small crack, and then another, and another, until one day you wake up with the feeling that you're living a life you no longer recognize as your own. That isn't bad luck. That's the accumulation of renunciations. Now comes the part that usually triggers resistance, because the brain defends itself when it feels exposed. But listen without running away. Many people who say, "I don't believe in signs," aren't being rational. They're being defensive. They don't reject the idea because it's false. They reject it because if it were true, they would have to take responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. It's much easier to say, "That's just how things are," than to say, "I chose to stay." It's more comfortable to think the world is arbitrary than to accept that you decide less than you could. Chance, in that sense, is an emotional anesthetic. It calms you. It removes guilt, but it also strips you of power. Psychology has seen this again and again. When a person feels they have no control, their vital energy drops. Apathy appears. Procrastination. The feeling of always being late, not because time is lacking, but because direction is. And here's something fascinating. Your brain is designed to detect patterns, even when you claim you don't believe in them. In fact, it detects them constantly. The difference lies in whether you trust what you see or immediately dismiss it. Some people live as if everything were noise. Others begin to notice repetitions, themes that return, situations that repeat under different names with the same emotions, relationships with the same ending, opportunities that appear right at the edge. That's not coincidence. That's a message insisting. But the message doesn't arrive in clear sentences. It doesn't say, do this or leave now. It comes as discomfort, as an inexplicable attraction, as a bodily sensation you can't explain, and the rational mind, accustomed to control, panics because it can't measure it, it can't prove it, it can't guarantee it, so it shuts it down. And the more you shut it down, the more disconnected you feel. Until one day you say, I don't know what I want. And psychologically, that isn't ignorance. It's saturation from ignored signals. There's something you must understand if you want to get out of that state. Seeing signs doesn't make you special. Acting on them does. The difference between a stagnant life and a moving one isn't intelligence, talent, or luck. It's the ability to respond. To respond even with fear. To respond without having everything clear. To respond knowing you might be wrong. Because the mind that waits for absolute certainty is condemned to never move. And here, a brutal paradox appears. The more you act, the more meaning you find. Not the other way around. Clarity doesn't arrive before the step, it arrives after. The brain builds coherence retrospectively. First you decide, then you understand. That's why some people seem lucky, not because the universe chose them, but because they don't ignore charged moments. They don't analyze them to death. They take them. They try them. They use them. And yes, sometimes they fail. Sometimes they lose. Sometimes they're wrong. But even there, something is different. They learn. They adjust. They become more sensitive, more attentive, faster at detecting the next opportunity. Meanwhile, those who wait remain intact and stuck. Now, I want you to think of something very specific, not in general, something real. When was the last time you felt that something pushed you to move? It could be an idea that came out of nowhere, a fatigue you could no longer ignore, a conversation that stirred something inside you, a rejection that hurt more than usual. That was a sign, not a promise, not a guarantee, an invitation. And here is the decisive point. Signs don't come to save you. They come to test you, to see whether you keep waiting or dare to play, to see whether you choose the safety of the known or the vertigo of what's possible. Life doesn't punish those who make mistakes. It punishes those who fall asleep. That's why there are moments that pass only once, not because they're unique, but because you're no longer the same when they return. Because the window closes not due to time, but due to accumulated indecision. If you keep calling everything that unsettles you chance, you'll keep living small. If you start asking, what is this moment asking of me? Something changes, not outside, inside. And that inner change is dangerous, because once you begin to see, you can't pretend you don't know. You can't return to the comfortable excuse. You can't say there was no other option. That's why this path isn't for everyone. It isn't relaxing. It isn't sweet. It's demanding. It forces you to look at yourself without anesthesia. It removes the refuge of coincidence and leaves you facing an uncomfortable but powerful question. Are you going to keep waiting for something to happen? Or are you going to become someone who makes things happen? Sit with that question. Don't answer it yet. Because what comes next isn't just another idea. It's the exact point where you stop being a spectator and start playing the real game.